So welcome everyone. Well, I'm going to just start by just go through here. So give us a bit of a break with with the tech. Still not that really good at it. So just to let everyone know, of course, we never start any webinars without recognising our amazing sponsors and partners. Just to let everyone know, so what we've done is we've put a cap on our partnership. So we've got our 3 principal partners as nail plate companies. They're the only one that can be our principal partners. We have 9 strategic partners and we have 18 supporting partners. So we have put a cap on that. And what we've turned around and tried to do is to say we've got a waiting list. And the good part is Independent Hardware this year decided they weren't going to continue their sponsorship. And so we went up to whoever was there and International Panels, Jason from Queensland, he's come on board as our new partner. So it's really great to have the support of these people, because it's only thanks to them that we can actually do a lot of the work that we've been doing. So I just wanted to, didn't want to let this opportunity go by without letting everyone know that this afternoon I'll be sending all members information on our state seminars. At this stage, we've only booked South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. All 3 events are in May, as you can see there. And the program is absolutely amazing. So on the fly that we've done up that will be sent out this afternoon gives a little bit more detail to all the speakers. So you have a better idea of what you're actually signing up for on the day. But unlike our last state seminars, the first half of the day, or first few hours, will be split into 3 rooms for our blue, red and green rooms for our MyTech, Multinail and Prida, where fabricators will go and join their nail plate company and go through some latest updates on their software or their machinery available. So we're joining forces. I think it will be an amazing event. It is really important to note fabricators can attend whether they're members or not. Our partners can attend, our life members, which is Phil McCormack and Peter Wines, they can attend, but it is not open to our supplier members. So if you are a supplier member, we do apologise, we did explain, but this is really important about making sure our partners have a better time, have a great time networking with our fabricators. I just also wanted to let you know, and we'll send out information next week about this, but on the Thursday, the 15th of April, we've got our next HR webinar, but this time it's with Jo Mason from Workhaven. Now, many of you may remember Jo. She's done a lot of work with us already. In fact, when she set up Workhaven, FTMA Australia was her first ever client. Jo used to work for Hein Timber, has done some amazing work, and I'm really proud to see all the work she's been doing with the Queensland government. But when she outlined what you as employers have to actually go through and the legislated information that you have to do, I asked Jo if she could not only do this webinar, but she's going to provide all the materials that for members. So FTMA will be paying the money to make sure that you've got templates for all these policies and legislative requirements that are being put on you, because it's a bloody hard time to be a fabricator. So that was all I wanted to do. Today is about catching up with Michael from HRAnywhere. So Michael, you can take your camera off and mic off. And yep, and you just let me know when to change the slides and I'll do them for you. Over to you, Michael.
Terrific. Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you for the opportunity. The first thing is, I think that photo is doing me a fair bit of justice, so I appreciate using that particular photo. So thank you, Kirsten, and thanks to all the FTMA members on here today. It's great to see so many people here, and we might as well get straight into it. So thank you, Kirsten. If we could just move forward, that would be great. So as we just convert over there, basically HRAnywhere, which a lot of you have had the opportunity of speaking to on various occasions, is here to provide support to the FTMA members. We're here to do what we can as far as the day-to-day issues, queries, questions you get, and obviously so many of you can deal with the day-to-day things, but there becomes bigger and broader issues around the award and some of the complexities with the award as well, that obviously we need to ensure that you are able to cover off. Today, what we want to cover off is probably 5 areas, sort of, if you like, what's called a know your award type scenario, where I'm sort of go through some of the key clauses and give you a sense of what they are and what they mean and how they can apply, but also where and what way you can be aware of the implications potentially on the organisations that you represent. There's a bit of FAQ around some of the questions that I get around these areas. There's also then around a lot of work and a lot of communication around wage theft, and also casuals. I know it's been again, casuals and their pathway and what your obligation is versus how it's changed now. And then finally, just some work around the Fair Work Ombudsman and what they're doing as far as investigations and what their particular focus is. Thank you. So if we then move to what basically the modern award is, and you hear this term a lot, but basically the modern award is the framework under which all the terms and conditions are set for a particular industry. For obviously everyone on this particular call, it's the Timber Industry Award, but there's plenty of other awards that apply to other industries across Australia. They provide the base level terms and conditions, but it's not only what's in the modern award that we need to be aware of, because the modern award often makes reference to the National Employment Standards. Now, the National Employment Standards are a set of provisions that also apply in conjunction with the modern award. And in particular, in our award here, there's reference to certain sections which say refer the National Employment Standards. So we need to be thinking about this in conjunction of not only the modern award, but also the National Employment Standards as being the two sort of bodies of information on which to help us make our decisions around what to do from an employment perspective. So the actual Timber Industry Modern Award, there's lots of streams in there, and by that I mean there's different sections within there. There's some strange provisions in this award, I've got to tell you. So for those that might use other awards in other businesses or other circumstances, don't think that the clauses that are in this particular area will apply to other areas. It may not work necessarily that way. I always look at the clause, because as much as I've read clauses, sometimes the content or the circumstance under which the example that is being provided to me differs slightly. So this allows me always to go back to the award. So I never try and answer a question off the cuff, because the wording is so important when it comes to determining whether or not your circumstance fits in, particularly that particular award. If we look at the key provisions, they're the main ones that come to mind when one is looking at the award, and what are the sort of the key areas that cause most of the questions, I suppose, that I get, not only in this industry, but across the board from the areas that I've worked on. Probably the first and most important distinction in this industry is the cashing out of personal leave. Now, the first thing I'll say, this is, and it's sort of the last point, but it's really the most important point, is this is not something you have to offer. This is not something you have to publicise. It's in the award, it's there, but it's the employee's choice as to whether they do it or don't do it. So in most awards and most provisions, sick leave is never cashed out, or personal leave is never cashed out. It's an entitlement that stays there, and if you have 50, 60, 70 days, well, that's okay, that's there for you, but it doesn't mean you get anything at the end of your employment. In this particular award, employees can, at their request, cash out up to 64 hours of personal leave, as long as they've got a minimum within and a base under which they do not go below. So they must have 15 days at all time within their particular area.
Sorry, Michael, I wasn't sharing the right page. I'll get back to the presentation.
No worries.
Oh. Sorry about that.
That's right. It's probably I was the. Here we go. That's all right. Most of it was just a bit of preamble. So the real rubber's hitting the road just here, and the next provision, next section, next slide, where we talk about the cashing out of the personal leave.
Is it that one? Yep. Perfect. Sorry about that.
That's all right. My fault as well. I didn't wasn't able to get in as I should have, so I apologise to those in attendance. But again, you'll have copies of this afterwards, so don't fear about having the copy. So they're the key provisions. Then if we think about the cashing out provision, as I said, a couple of things. It has to be in writing, so the employee must ask for it in writing, and any agreement the record must be kept as well. But again, they have to keep a minimum of 15 days. They can only cash out up to 64 hours, and they can only do it once a year. So what it also means is that they can actually, and I've had this a question, often they get to the end of their employment and they think they can just cash out the rest of it. Again, no, there's only certain occasions, which are what we just talked about then, where the cashing out becomes important for you as a business to be aware of. And it's important to keep the record, because often you'll have some of them, an employee trying to do it multiple times in a year. So you have it once, keep the record, and then it's only if they request. There's no obligation upon you to ask them if they want to cash out if they've got excessive amounts of leave.
And a good point there, Michael, is that one of the members up in Queensland who had with the recent cyclone Alfred, they allowed those members that had abundant amount of sick leave, personal leave, they allowed them to use their personal leave rather than take annual leave when they had to shut down because of the cyclone.
Yeah, so great use of it, and those employers will be forever grateful to the employer for doing that, and that's where it was used in a beneficial way for both sides by talking through and working at it. So a great example. We then move on to annual leave, and this is just for day workers. There's some slightly separate provisions for shift workers. If there's any questions about shift workers, we sort of deal with them separately. But first thing, obviously, there's the loading, the 7.5% loading, which applies for people when they take leave. So that's the first thing. But it's only initially when it's taken from the perspective of the qualifying period. And by that, they talk about the fact that an employee needs to have worked a certain amount of time over the first 12 months in order to be entitled to that particular loading. Save and except if someone were to leave in that first, 8, 10 months, or more importantly, if someone were to leave after 16 or 17 months, there is provisions for the employee in certain circumstances to still get some of the loading. So what the key message I'd say here is each example, each circumstance we should talk about, because there may be some circumstances, where the individual has left, as it says there, through no fault of their own, and there is some entitlement to it. So rather than go through every example that might apply, this is a great example where I talked about at the start, where it says, look, let's just be conscious that there's the provisions are there. Always ask the question around, here's my circumstance, here's how much leave they've taken, and what is it they're entitled to. So that's an important thing. Excessive leave, 8 weeks. If they have 8 weeks and you're getting concerned that the liability is building up in your organisation, you can ask them to take leave. Obviously, consultation is the first and key component, but you can ask them to, calendar and diarise some leave to get it back to a manageable figure, which is normally about 4 weeks. And also there is the provisions where they can cash out leave of 2 weeks per year, as long as there's a 4-week minimum. So excessive amounts of leave, you can require them to take leave, particularly and as you looked, and we'll get to this in the next slide around shutdowns. But again, it's important to bear in mind that there are some levers that you can pull as an employer to make certain that employees don't build up excessive amounts of leave. And as we know, with wage increases that apply year on year, that gets flowed through the system, that leaves liability to you as an employer can rise dramatically over time. So, and also it can help manage when people are working for you so that they are taking leave at the right time and not without pay, say, for example, at shutdown periods, which is probably a good segue into the next example where, and this is something that sort of has come in of recent times, where you actually do need to provide written notification to anyone in your business if you're planning what they call a temporary shutdown. Now, the temporary shutdown is essentially, the Christmas period, or it might be at Easter in some circumstances. But more relevantly, it's around the Christmas New Year period. And from that perspective, it's really just giving them the minimum amount of notice that says, hey, we're planning the shutdown. I know you probably had it every year, or it's sort of something that you might normally do. But it's important to have a record of that, because there has been some cases recently where people weren't notified and the employees tried to argue that they didn't have to take leave because the employer didn't provide the correct notification in that circumstance. So from that perspective, again, it's just being aware from a shutdown period. Make certain you've got in your calendar that at some stage in November, the dates coming up of a Christmas New Year period, that if you are looking to shut down, that you provide that appropriate amount of notice period, a minimum of 28 days in that circumstance. So that's annual leave. And as I said, particularly as we go back around the day workers and the proportion of payment, the key thing at that point is let's have a look at each example, because it may or may not mean that you need to pay some of it on that, proportion of leave. And by that we mean, where they haven't done the full 12 months.
Sorry about this. Yeah, it just won't move on from each slide. I don't know what the hell's going on, but we will, just keep on trying and seeing how we're sharing. So I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, as I say, sometimes it's actually good to talk to and not just always look at the slides. I'm talking about personal carers leave. So 10 days personal carers leave, and 2 days paid compassionate leave. Doesn't apply to casuals. Now, the key things for you to remember here are, one, that even with personal leave, that an employee needs to provide as much notice. Oh, there you go, beautiful. As much notice as practicable. So you can work with them or you can set your parameters. But I get a lot of questions and queries about people that are ringing up at, or texting, hours after their shift started to say, oh, look, I'm going to be away today. Now, from an operational perspective, that makes it really difficult to be able to run your business because you don't know whether they're coming in or not. So that's an important one to get on top of earlier, that you, as soon as practical, really means before the start of their shift. Most people know well before the start of the shift if they're going to be absent from work, unless it isn't a true emergency. But again, there is some standards you can ask from employees to make certain that they meet there. Another question that gets brought up a lot is, well, what evidence can I ask for? And it's sort of a vague term, but it says evidence satisfactory to you. And by reasonable evidence and evidence satisfactory to you is that you can again set the standard there. Often in businesses will say, well, I'll give you 2, 3 or 4 single day absences without any particular notification. And then I'll ask you to provide notification for any single days above that. But the key thing is it's got to be reasonable evidence to you. And again, as I say, that term can be a bit vague, but you do have the provisions, and importantly around someone being able and required to notify you of their absence, and also for you being able to ask reasonable evidence if they're not at work.
But
So
Michael, you need Sorry, Michael, you need to have that in your contract though, don't you? Like I had an employee, a member ring the other day. It was after the long weekend. An employee said they were sick and they rang up and said, do they have to give us a sick certificate? And I said, well, as far as I'm aware, the Timber Industry Award doesn't stipulate you need to provide sick certificates. It's not mentioned anywhere anymore. You can only enforce that if it's in your contract.
Yeah, you set the standard correct, Kirsten.
In your contract, yes.
Yeah.
So people need to understand, even if you have to have a contract in place that tells them if you want them to say that they have to provide a certificate, or if it's they have to provide a certificate for more than 2 or 3 days, you have to put that in your employment contract. You can't rely on the Timber Industry Award because it doesn't refer to that in that.
And I think Julie just posed a question. Julie, yes, also, or if you've got a policy document that the employee agrees to, you can put in your policy document as well. So either one that Kirsten said or that, but you can set, the most important thing is you can set the standard that you need in order to manage those individuals. And it's a good thing to have those standards, be it your policy or in your contract. Overtime.
Has that come up as overtime on the screen, everyone?
Yep.
No? Has
Yes.
it?
Looks
it
great.
has. Good. Great. Go for it.
Super work. 10 out of 10, Kirsten. Thank you, Julia. On the ball there, Julia. Thank you. Appreciate it. The first thing is you'll have a set of hours that people will normally work. I mean, once they work outside that spread, technically, they're entitled to overtime. Often people might say, oh, I'll get them to work a couple of hours here and I'll give them a couple of hours off over there. That won't work in the long term, because an employee can come back and say, yeah, he might have given me 2 or 3 hours off the next day, but I still worked past my hours and I wasn't paid overtime. And I know a lot of employers that I've dealt with over the years, think that they can work just having this arrangement, but the overtime kicks in straight away. And again, unless you've got very particular set of agreements to allow for that, you just can't do it by verbal agreement with somebody to say, well, can you work 2 hours extra today outside your spread and I'll give you 2 hours off there tomorrow. That's not unless you've got a specific, as I said, very detailed agreement, that's not something that will apply. Also, if they've worked across the week or the day, more hours, again, you just can't juggle them around and think, well, I'll give them more time off here. You need to be conscious of the fact that the provisions are very clear about when the overtime gets payable and when it kicks in as far as that employee being entitled to that overtime provision. And I know it might work in a lot of cases, but by agreement just with the individual employee, without something very clear, can lead to disagreements later on in the employment relationship and can lead to back payment claims for those times where the employee claims that they worked overtime and weren't paid correctly.
And again, to point at another example there. So if when it says at the start there about the ordinary daily number of hours, it has to be within that work zone. So it's 6:30 to 6 is our regular work time frame within the Timber Industry Award. So if your employees start at 6 or at 5:30, I've had members say, hey, we start early because they're all surfers, they want to finish early. You have to get a permission from Fair Work. You cannot just simply say, okay, we're going to start at 5:30. You can start at 5:30, but you have to pay overtime from 5:30 to 6:30 because 6:30 is their normal start of their day. So anyone that starts before 6:30, unless it's approved through Fair Work, doesn't matter if it's in your contract, outside those hours have to be paid overtime. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, and that's why I sort of said in a lot of cases, people just make an agreement with the person thinking that'll be okay. You and the employee can't just make an agreement. No, it needs to be validated by the Fair Work Commission, quite rightly, as you said, Kirsten. So that's when I was talking about a very detailed, complicated agreement. It needs to be via Fair Work. It can't be something that you and an individual, even though it might suit them to start earlier. And the same thing applies at the end of the day. I think Julia asked that. So the same thing applies at both ends of the scale there. So it becomes really important. I've had a couple of queries around hours of work and what do we need to do if we want to change hours of work. There's a very strong provision around consultation in the Timber Industry Award. And so it's really important that if you do propose to go through any changes, you need to consult with the employees, explain what the change is, invite them to give their views, and then ultimately consider their views, and then you can make a decision around what it is and confirm it in writing. That might provide this is fine in this agreement when it's within the normal spread of hours, and you might be changing it from 7 till 6:30, and it's in the normal spread. If you're going outside the spread and looking to do something that's similar to what we talked about there, you'd need to take that written agreement to Fair Work. This is in the circumstance where you just want to change the hours of work of a person, and it's within the normal spread of hours, but you've already got an agreement with them. This allows you to consult and then make the relevant changes to that particular person. Or if you wanted to go from full-time employee to say part-time, then from that perspective, you're able to again find a way through this consultation period. I think there was a question about back payment. They can go back 6 years, and Fair Work can approve these fairly rapidly. I mean, there might be 4 weeks, which in the Fair Work world, that's rapid. To you and I, that may not be rapid, but in their world, that's a rapid period of time. And the other thing that's happened in terms of back payments is before the employee had to provide the evidence to say that they're underpaid. Now the onus is on us, the employers, to show that we didn't do something wrong. So that's, again, a little bit of an onus on us to make certain. Just some of the FAQs that fly around here. We might come back to that question. So we might just go through this and then we'll come back to the specifics. Is that all right? Yeah. I'll just finish off that one there. Yeah, so there's a couple of good questions that are coming up, Kirsten. We might get those, and I might even put together a bit of a broader FAQ subject to those questions that are there. First thing is, I'm paying above the awards, therefore the award rates, therefore I don't need to worry about anything as far as the award says. No. You still need to be conscious of whatever you're paying here, that the equal to or greater than if you applied the award. So often people misunderstand or misconstrue that, well, I'm paying them over the award rates, therefore I don't need to worry about it. Two things, you absolutely need to be equal or greater than the award, and you need to have an offset clause. And by the offset clause, that means that whatever they would have been entitled to under the award is offset by the total amount that you've paid that particular person. And that's really important that you have that, because otherwise you might have an arrangement where a person gets the higher amount, but if you haven't specified that there can be what you're paying them can be offset against the award, you can find that you've paid over the award but haven't offset the penalties that are in there.
And if anyone's confused, it's important to note, like, FTMA's got a contract there for your full-time employees, for your casual employees, and it's written for the Timber Industry Award. So that standard contract is there for you to use. Now, if you pay above the award, if you want to go to 4 days a week, if you are working outside those hours and you need to have your contract changed, that's where you engage HRAnywhere at special rates to actually then work directly with you to do that. But the standard contract we provide just covers that. But if you try and then change it, that's something that you have to actually address. But I'll go to the next frequently. There's the next one up. Yep.
Also, I get this, oh, well, I'm paying above the award. I don't have to worry about the award at all. No, again, there's only very few occasions where the award won't apply. And I said that at the start, they cover all those particular areas. So again, just paying above the award rates doesn't automatically mean that things don't apply. As Kirsten said, unless you've got a very specific agreement, which is what has been put together by the FTMA, which covers off some of these areas. Otherwise, you need to be very conscious around what it is that you do in relation to the award. And if you're looking to do these things, then I suggest that you get advice before just agreeing to the employee. Can the employee opt out of the award? The same things. You just can't opt out of the award. The award's going to be there all the time. And by opting out means, yeah, I'm going to pay you some more money, or no, we don't really want to follow the award because it's restrictive. It does apply, and it's a matter of law. And when we'll see later on, just ignoring the award can be very significantly to your detriment, particularly now as they've changed things. Just again, always an joy to know that the wage rates will likely go up again. But again, through the association, Kirsten and HRAnywhere, we make certain that we provide those to you. And again, because it's normally announced late April, early June, or late May, early June, somewhere between that time frame, we'll have those to you in time for any adjustments. They give you enough time to make the changes to your payroll.
Yeah, unfortunately, Fair Work doesn't release the exact figures to the cent until the 1st of July or the 30th of June. So we guarantee that it will come out on the 1st of July. It won't come out before that, though.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, correct. Know what they are, and we'll be ready to go. Yeah, it's just in case of that.
Yep.
The big pieces of legislation, and I'll provide this guide to Kirsten around this and that. Wage thefts become a big deal. And really where and how this is about is, again, it's about those employers who deliberately try and take money away and or deliberately not pay people what they're entitled to do. So the legislation came into force on the 1st of January. There will be, and the major part of it now is that there can be criminal sanctions. So before it was just civil, you could be fined. Now, a bit like what happened with, OH&S laws, where it's just fines, and now you can actually have criminal and convictions. Similar here, you can actually have potential convictions and it's not just if you make a mistake. This is really all about if you deliberately and willfully try and do something when it comes to payment of wages. So there'll be more to come on this, but you'll find that employers, this guide, as I say, it steps out what you need to do in order to make certain that you're compliant. And we cover some of those steps off in a minute. It'll be all the things you do at the moment. But more and more, this will be the guide, that overarching guide that one looks at when one is determining whether or not someone has deliberately or intentionally tried to engage in, again, what's officially known as wage theft. So the key terms to not be concerned about is if there's just a mistake and you genuinely made a mistake, that's fine. But when you absolutely ignore the award, or you intentionally say, I'm going to do this because I don't want to have to pay that, that's where these will come into. If it's an accident, and it does happen all the time, that's fine. And the other part is, if you become aware of something, there is an onus upon you now under this legislation to go about fixing it. But again, if you're doing the right thing, which I know, majority of employers are, this is not anything to be concerned about. Probably the only thing that's changed for us is the fact that when we become aware of something, we do need to act upon it and try and fix the problem as it relates to what it is that we've uncovered. So what they talk about is they've got a sort of whole series of steps, and that is to look at. So they're the terms to think about. When it comes to what it is, it's really, and this is what the code talks about, just going through step by step and making certain that, if there is anything that applies to you that might be different or new or otherwise. And you might find in the paper, even some of the biggest organisations are having trouble with this. Just on a weekly basis, there's a major organisation. There was a major university in Victoria last week, $15 million under payments. So it's not easy. But again, with the work that Kirsten does and the documentation she provides to you, you follow that documentation, you shouldn't have any issues. And if issues do arise, we can deal with it. But again, if there was something you wanted to get done, HRAnywhere can do that outside of the general support and guidance, as I said, that Kirsten provides. And the general support, and her knowledge of the award obviously is very, very good as well. So, but that's the sort of things that they look at to see whether or not we've done something. Casual employees, Big change is around one, before the employer had to, have this 6-month provision, which was about saying, hey, hang on a sec, you've reached 6 months, you now need to go from, or be offered at least to go from a casual to a full-time position. That's flipped around now, where the onus rests with the employee as to seek whether or not they wish to proceed. And I haven't heard in my time of many casuals wanting to go from casual to full-time. It does happen, but a lot prefer the payments. Where it's changed a bit is around the definition of a casual employee. And again, this is hard to apply when you think about it in the true sense, but this is about whether or not it is just really a standalone provision. What the Fair Work Act has tightened up is they don't want to see regularly rostered casuals. That's basically what they're saying, which is not really what happens out there in the industry. Out in the industry, we see lots of this happen. And what they look at is the overall situation, whether or not there was an ongoing relationship between you and the casual employee. And that goes to a whole lot of different factors there. The reason that becomes relevant also is because of unfair dismissal provisions, which again, casuals can't get access to, but if they can determine that they weren't casual, then this can sometimes come into play. But there's a lot of factors now they look at it, and they're just some of them. It's really, they look at beyond whether or not you just pay the loading. There's the casual conversion pathway I mentioned just before. Again, this is now put there, but again, it's the casuals that need to provide in writing. You can refuse it, and I've done that successfully for a number of employers across the board. But again, it's up to the casual themselves this time to request, but you can, if it doesn't suit your business and some of your sizes, it may not. So again, that's important from that perspective. I throw in there the casual. This is an important document that if you do have a casual or you employ a casual, you need to include this with any letters of employment, just as you do for a full-time employee. Again, there's potential penalties if you don't provide this. So again, just a reminder that this information sheet has all the details on data as around who should get it, and also, again, what a casual definition means now in the new world.
And that's just available on the Fair Work website. So when we send out all the information, we can download it and send it around.
Yep, perfect. Absolutely, yes. And if it changes, we'll provide changes. As I mentioned before about the casuals, there's also now a lot of conversation around whether someone's a contractor or an employee. And look, it's a very difficult situation, but the most important thing, again, in all these scenarios is really for the contractor is that they can work for you and work for anybody else. And they've got the ability to do that. So they work out how they want to do the work. They take most of the risk. They're really the ones determining it. I know there's some businesses where contractors work, and have worked for the same business for 5-10 years. They may run into trouble later on, but if you're looking to engage anybody at the moment, it's all about making certain that that person has the ability to work elsewhere, and that they're the ones that are really taking the risk, and they're the ones in charge of the job, setting up the job, and has the control over the way the work is performed. Fair Work Ombudsman, I mentioned before that they are out and about as far as looking to see where and how they can enforce provisions of underpayments. Record amount of fair work claims, rules very strictly adhered to, and that underpayment. And there's so they're just some of the headlines that every day are appearing in the newspaper around the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman, both of them sort of around. In this case here, they targeted just some restaurants in a particular area. Significant amounts of, this was only September last year. What's important is that 46 out of the 51 employers in this case had breached some of them. And that might have been, penalty rates, which I mentioned earlier. It was restaurants, so there was some issues about minimum wages, but also record keeping. And that's why I always talked about and have talked about written documentation throughout the year. I say this not because, this industry is being targeted, not at all. I say from the context of they are going around, there's more of them, and we just have to keep doing what we're doing, and that is paying the right way, looking after the people, and documenting anything that we do, and following the provisions that and letters and policies that Kirsten has made available through the association. And that way, then, in terms of any potential breaches, you're minimising that risk because you're using the association in the best way possible, and that is by having them provide the documentation to you. And then probably just, finally, if you are having any meetings with anyone about performance issues or anything else, very short, sharp sort of approach. Notes, make certain that you obviously keep notes. That's the most important thing overall. But it's having this process, thinking about, okay, giving them notification of the fact that you want to talk to them. Keeping any emails of confirmation of any discussions you've had. Keeping any records by letters of any meetings. One of these things that comes up a lot, if they want a support person, you don't have to offer one, but if they ask for a support person at a meeting, they have to be given one. And where the cases have gone against employers is where they call somebody in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and give them no time to prepare for the meeting, and that seems to be ambushing them. So if you are wanting to sit down and talk with them, just bear in mind, okay, to have the documentation and follow that process through those particular circumstances with your employees, and that places you in the best stead should something happen with them at a later stage.
And I think it's really important, as you said, I just went completely blank then. But I was just saying, members always say to me, how do I get rid of this shit employee? How do I get rid of this bloke? He's doing my head in. And I go, how many warnings have you given him? None. Why not? Oh, it's just not worth it. As I keep saying, the only way you can fire someone is if you've got bullets in the gun, so to speak. And if they're not loaded, so I look at your first, second and third warning as your bullets. And I know it happened in my husband's business not long ago. They went to give someone their second warning or third warning, and then they went, we're sacking him. And I go, you can't do it straight away. You have to do it in separate meetings. And I know it sounds bullshit, and it really is, but it just goes back to you to say, document everything. Document, file, and make sure you do those warning letters. So I was going to go through, we've got here a question from Marnie about, can an IFA change standard hours to avoid overtime?
The issue around standovers, Fair Work Commission will be concerned if you are deliberate. There need to be something in there for the employee to want to agree to it. And so the Fair Work Commission looks at the overall agreement, and it would need to be that it might have to suit the employee, and the employee would have to genuinely agree to do it in order for that to be the case. And in many cases, the employee would be reluctant to do that. But we'd need to look at the total agreement to see whether or not it would pass the test at the Fair Work Commission in that example.
And Julia, you asked about what was the usual finish time. So it's our Timber Industry Award is 6:30 to 6 p.m. Is that right, Michael?
Yep, correct.
Yep, 6:30 to 6 p.m. Anything outside those hours, you have to pay overtime. We've got one from Janet saying, how long does the Fair Work Commission approval take, and would they have to do back pay? So yes, the back pay is 6 years. How long does Fair Work approval take? Is Janet, I'm presuming you mean in regards to putting in an application. So if an employer goes to Fair Work, you'd have to do all the consultation with your employees first and have everyone agree. There'd be steps there to take.
Yep, you need exactly right. So you need to go step by step through that. Correct, Kirsten?
Yep. I'm just going. I thought I could change everyone on. So a work day from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. needs approval by Fair Work. Yes. And so what we might do, Michael, we might generate something around the usual hours and talk about how people, and we'll do a fact sheet, send it out to everyone.
Yeah.
So if you're starting 6 to 4, that half hour in the morning has to be paid overtime unless changed and approved by Fair Work. And I believe that if we see a lot of members going forward and putting through applications to change the ordinary hours, I reckon the union would be highlighted to that, and I think we'd have a lot of focus on our sector.
Yeah, that's true. The question about I think it was about misconduct. Yeah, in terms of the warnings, misconduct is different, but you still need to document whatever it is that the misconduct's about. Kirsten said document, document, document. So even if it's misconduct, you still need to document it so that if it's challenged later on, you've got your evidence to support what you do.
Yep. So, Christy, you asked about if the Fair Work Commission does approve the overtime rate. So if they change and accept your rates at being, 6 till 5, for example, or 4, if they approve your ordinary hours, then you wouldn't have to pay overtime. But Fair Work would have to actually sign off on that at the changing. But as I said, there would be definite steps that you have to go through in regards to consultation, documentation, before you actually go to Fair Work. But as I said, Michael will put together a bit of a checklist on what you have to do there.
Yeah, and also some examples so you can sort of see the sort of things that are likely to get through and likely not.
Can you re-explain the leave loading on termination clauses and in which scenarios it's not payable?
I'll give you just the simplest example, remembering that each one we should look at. So if someone has been with someone, say, for 18 months, so they've got the first 4 weeks and the first 12 months. Then in the second 6 months, they haven't obviously completed the first full 12 months. If they were to leave because they're going to another job, they would, for the first 12 months or the first 4 weeks, they would get the leave loading on that 4 weeks. But because they've left of their own volition, their own decision, they wouldn't get it on the next 6 months because they've decided to leave themselves.
Okay.
So so they decide to leave them. In that case, yeah, Christy, they decide to leave themselves, yeah.
Yeah. And Julia said about best practice also says that employees understand what a serious misconduct is. So that comes down to the way that you actually induct your people into your employment. They should have it specifically laid out exactly what your terms are. So, for example, we've had a member recently who has sacked somebody on the spot for harassment and bullying, and it was a severe case where the police were actually going to charge the employee for their harassment and stalking. Now, automatically, that's acceptable because it's in their contract that if it's, sexual misconduct or theft, there might be things in your contract that say it's an automatic dismissal. Violence is another one. I know when I used to have my kids' birthday parties, drugs and violence, that's it. Any party's over. I was always happy when a fight broke out at 11 o'clock because I could make sure everyone went. But you have to put it in your policies and have that induction. Your employees, I know it sounds ridiculous, but your employees need to know that they're not allowed to have fights at work. And you have to tell them that, because if they have a fight and it's not covered in your contract around violence, then you can give them a warning of behaviour, but you can't do anything else. Is the work schedule 3 to 12? Is afternoon shift rates applicable or overtime rates for the duration?
I think that would be a shift rate provision. I'd need just to check the exact hours, but it will be a shift rate provision.
Yep.
Yep, so that would be shift work, yep.
I was going to... Now, is a hand up for anyone that hasn't asked a question, and I'll try and get you off, like if your question hasn't been answered. So I can come to you. Otherwise, what we'll do, as I said, with all these questions there, we'll actually try and approach them. But the big issues have been, a lot of members are saying they want to go to 4 days. There is a process that you have to go through. It's not just about saying to your employee, you can't have an employee that's doing 5 days a week that you just go, nah, your hours are being cut and you're going from a full-time to a part-time. You can't do that. how fast do you have to address serious misconduct? So if management is away, how do they address it if the management's away when it happens, Michael?
The Commission will look at that fact. Normally, depending on how serious it is, you would suspend the employee until management come back. Yeah. So
With pay or without pay?
With pay.
With pay. Suspend them with pay until management comes back.
Yep. That's the safest, simplest way. It might be a day or two, but it's better than letting him, because if you let him stay working, Commission then says, well, you obviously didn't think it was that serious because you let him keep working.
Yep. And if you let him keep working and they mightn't think their case is going too well, they might have an accident and then you're in for the long haul.
Yep.
Are we required to pay overtime if our employee is asked to work 40 to 45 hours per week? If it's within the 6:30 to 6 p.m, so if workers say they want to do 40 to 45 hours, you still have to pay them overtime, yeah?
Yes, because that would be what we talked about earlier, contracting outside of the award. So the award doesn't allow you to work 45 ordinary hours. So you can't just have them agree to do it. It's not an agreement that's binding.
Yep. Okay, so as I said, we will go through every question, make sure that we've actually addressed it, and we'll do up that fact sheet because it's really caught some people off guard with the 6 to 6:30 as the reasonable hours, the ordinary hours, I should say, and that's something we have to address. But so as everyone needs to understand, with the HR portal, you've got your email, you've got your phone numbers. If it's urgent, and in the case of an urgent situation, you can call Michael on his mobile.
Yep.
All of the inquiries should go through the email or ring the phone. And if you can't reach them and it is urgent, always call me and I'll make sure we get onto it. We have got a question here from Alicia. What about office staff that are required to stay back for later meetings? They're not under the Timber Industry Award, firstly. So that ordinary hours of 6 to 6:30, 6:30, yeah, I got it wrong. Yeah. So office staff are under a Clerk's Award. Does that apply to them, Michael? Would you know under a Clerk's Award?
I'd need to check the award because, again, as I said earlier, I'd like to look at it before, but we can address that. I mean, the key thing again is what does it say within your agreement at the moment? People just volunteering to just stay back without payment is not really something that Fair Work condones.
Yeah. Christy, no, designers, estimators. So a low level designer is classified in the Timber Industry Award under level 5. So whereas senior designers, experienced designers are not covered under any award. The census, we've got the census going out in the next fortnight to everyone. What we've done a little bit different at this census is we're actually trying to find out what the average wage is for a timber systems designer. I reckon it has to be one of the most highly asked questions of me. What's the average? And I know people that are on 60,000. I know people that are on 120,000. Whenever I tell my board that, they all go, oh, could you point me in the direction of those that get 60,000? To which they get told no. So what we're going to do in the census is ask what the average wage is, Christy, and we're hoping that we can come back, and we're asking for trainee, for a normal timber systems design and a supervisor. So we're hoping we'll be able to come back to everyone and show what the average wage is, whether that includes, phone allowance, vehicle allowance, whether they can work from home. So we thought if we can get that kind of information, because we are not covered by an award when it comes to timber systems designers. And so I think we need to try and, as an industry, try and find some average wage levels, and that's what we're hoping from this census. Every fabricator that actually completes the census will get a copy of the report as soon as it's done. Everyone else will have to wait a month or so. Okay, I think we've got every question there. So thank you very much, Michael. As everyone can see, the Timber Industry Award is, and I have to, hats off to the manufacturing CFMU department, because they have got some doozies in our award that they've fought for over the years. And I have to, Michael O'Connor has definitely got in some very hard ones for employees, for employers. So make sure you've got your copy of your Timber Industry Award. We're updating all the fact sheets at the moment. Gabby from HRAnywhere has provided updates, so we make sure that information's out. and we will send it around to everybody. So we'll send this presentation, recording. I'll download that casual fair work, and when we send it around, I'll also send you the contracts that we've done. The standard contracts are there for your use. If you need them adjusted to you, HRAnywhere offers FTMA members a good rate to then work specifically with you to do that. So otherwise, thanks very much. Sorry for the tech issues. I always say I don't do tech, but I wish I could be better at this, and some training that I have to do. So self-improvement ready.
Can I say thanks to everyone? Really great questions, and that really helps set up the FAQ and the bigger document. So if they've got any other questions, they can send you after the presentation. Kirsten, that's great. So the more questions, the better document for everyone.
Totally agree, Michael. Yeah, because don't think it's a dumb question, because I can guarantee you for every time someone goes, oh, this is a dumb question, I go, no, it's not, because I've had about 10 people ask it. So it'd be really good if you can get through those questions. So if you get off this and you see the presentation, send it through, and that way we'll get Michael to work on a really updated FAQ addressing all these issues. So thanks for all the amazing questions, and we'll all talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.